Howdy, Immortalium here, and today I'm going to be reviewing the first season of a very popular franchise, Lupin the Third, Part 1. So, Lupin the Third Part 1 started airing in 1971 and was based on a manga series written and drawn by Monkey Punch. Masaki Usumi wanted to create an anime version of it and to market it towards adults, because up to that point anime was predominantly marketed towards children. However, when Lupin the Third Part 1 started airing, it didn't do too well, and Masaki Usumi was taken off of the project and replaced by two other up-and-coming directors, Isao Takahata and Hayao Miyazaki. If those names seem familiar to you, it's because they went on to co-found Studio Ghibli and create some of the greatest animated movies of all time. However, even they couldn't save Lupin the Third Part 1 from getting cancelled, and it wasn't until years later, when Lupin the Third Part 1 reruns had become popular, that a second season was commissioned and Lupin the Third as a franchise was truly born. However, what is the first season like? First of all, what is the story of Lupin the Third Part 1? Lupin the Third, surprisingly, follows a character called Lupin the Third, who is a master thief. He's assisted by an expert gunslinger named Daisuke Jigen, has a romantic interest called Fujiko Mine, who is a femme fatale, and is pursued by a man named Inspector Zenigata, who has made it his life mission to capture Lupin the Third and bring him to justice. If you're familiar with the Lupin the Third franchise, you'll notice that I left out a particular character, and the reason for that is that that character isn't actually introduced in this season until several episodes in, and even then is introduced more as an antagonist than anything else. And so I'd consider it a bit of a spoiler. However, if you're familiar with the cast of Lupin the Third, you will know exactly who I'm talking about. With regards to the story of Lupin the Third, it is an episodic series, and in fact the only ongoing story you could argue for is actually that character that I just brought up, which lasts for a grand total of 2 episodes. Beyond that, each episode is its own self-contained story, dealing with either Lupin the Third seeking some kind of treasure, facing off against some kind of villainous organization, or ending up in some kind of weird, threatening situation. I have to say that I absolutely love this season so much. I think the quality of storytelling in each episode is particularly great. And even though there's 1 or 2 episodes in there that I kind of consider a bit on average in terms of quality, in general I think the actual overall quality of this season is particularly high. And it quickly became one of my favorite anime series. However, there are a couple of things that are worth noting about this first season. And one is a kind of a tonal shift. Masaki Usumi obviously wanted this series to be edgy, and so the first several episodes are actually quite different to many other Lupin incarnations, that they're a lot darker, they're a lot grimmer. After Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata took over, they made it a little bit more family friendly, a little bit more comedic, a little bit more enjoyable. I still like both halves of this series quite a bit, but I do know that it can be quite troubling to some people, the sharp tonal shift from the beginning to the end. And speaking of shifts, it's worth pointing out the animation. So the animation for this series was created by a company called Tokyo Movie Shinsha, who is famous for animating the Detective Conan franchise, as well as having done 2 short films that I reviewed recently called Panda Go Panda. The animation in this series is quite old style, but very enjoyable. However, just like the story, there is a bit of a shift between the beginning of the series and the end of the series. When Masaki Usumi was in charge of it, it was more realistic looking, but it was kind of rougher around the edges in terms of animation. When Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata took over, they introduced a kind of a slightly more cartoony look to it, which improved the overall animation of the series. I think it holds up quite well, but obviously it's not going to be up to everyone's tastes. With regards to the music, now the Lupin the Third franchise is quite famous for its musical scores, which are quite jazz-themed. However, that really came about in Lupin the Third Part 2 with the introduction of Yuji Ono as the composer. Yuji Ono wasn't involved in this first season, and so even though the soundtrack in general is still pretty good, it lacks the flair that Yuji Ono soundtracks have in later incarnations. And I think nothing represents this better than the opening theme, which I've been told by a lot of people when I show them this that they find the opening theme quite irritating, because it's just kind of repeating the main character's name over and over. Lupin, 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 Lupin the Third. Even though I find that song quite catchy, I can understand why it'd be quite grating to some people. And so even though I think the soundtrack itself was still pretty decent, it doesn't hold a candle to later incarnations of the Lupin the Third franchise, and so that might irk some people. So with regards to the cast, the first thing that should be taken note of is the fact that there's no English dub for this series. There's only the Japanese dub, and so for those who grew up watching the English dub version of Lupin the Third Part 2, they might find the fact that there is no English dub available for this first season to be a little disappointing. However, I have to say the Japanese cast do a really good job here. Even though it is worth noting that Fujiko Mine and the other characters I have yet to mention are voiced by different people to their later incarnations. Even though I had no trouble moving from this series to the second series, it is worth noting that they are played by different people. In regards to the way it was released, this was released by a company called Discotek Media, who have released a lot of the Lupin the Third franchise in America. Even though they are an American company, and in fact the back of this DVD box set says Region 1, it actually works on my Region 2 player. If you have a Region 1 or a Region 2 player, you can actually pick up this box set and have it run no problem. Beyond those regions, I have no idea. I just know that it works on both Region 1 and Region 2. And they do a very good job here with some very nice extras on here. We have both versions of the original Lupin the Third pilot film, which was essentially just showing off the characters and trying to market around for either a film project or a TV project. We have some commentaries from Lupin the Third experts. Perhaps the greatest extra in this box set is actually a variety of notes that have been made about each episode, giving details on production, giving details on like the products that the characters are using, etc, etc. There's a lot of great information here, and I think that any Lupin the Third fan will be very happy with the amount of extras in this box set. It's a great package overall. So in conclusion, Lupin the Third Part 1. What do I think of it? I think this is an exceptional series, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. I know the fact that it's old may be off-putting to some people. After all, it's going to be celebrating its 50th anniversary next year. I think that any anime fan should pick up this box set and give Lupin the Third Part 1 a try. Because I think it's just an exceptionally good series. It's highly influential in Japan. The director of Cowboy Bebop, Shinichiro Watanabe, has actually credited this series as being a large influence on Cowboy Bebop. I think it's absolutely great to watch, and I think any anime fan should check it out. So thanks for watching, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye bye.